ADHD and addiction. When the DMN rules, it demands more. This hunger can be satisfied through artistic achievement, or through entrepreneurial wheeling. And dealing, or, maybe best of all, through love. But if and when these efforts don't pay off, the novel you're writing doesn't resonate with readers, the deal falls through, the relationship ends. You have to start the search again for how you will bring ordinary life sufficiently alive to satisfy the hunger of your imagination. While this hunger can lead to magnificent achievements of many kinds, in the extreme, this exact same hunger drives addiction. That's why addictions of all kinds are 5 to 10 times more common in people who have ADHD than in the general population. We live with an itch at our core that can only be scratched in certain ways. Creative achievement is perhaps the most adaptive, worthwhile, and sustainable. While addictions, of all kinds, are the most maladaptive and destructive. All of this goes a long way toward explaining the truism so often observed. That creative talent goes hand in hand with addiction, depression, bipolar disorder, ADHD, and all manner of mental disturbance. It's largely a function of the overlap of the angel and the demon. The glitchy connections that appear in this part of the brain in highly creative people. Certainly in people who've been studied with classically defined ADHD. Though the connection has not been formally researched, we see people with the variable attention stimulus trait, VAST, in our practices who are increasingly struggling with addictions too. The glitchy switch in action. Now that you know a little bit about glitchy connections and faulty toggle switches in the ADHD brain, you can start to recognize when you or a loved one is stuck, and what part of the brain is taking hold. This is of enormous practical value, not just academic interest, which we will get into later. But first, an illustration. John Ratey's Uncle Ron. While he is, sadly, no longer with us, the stories surrounding his ADHD are legendary within the family, and live on in affectionate retelling at holiday gatherings. A beloved elementary school teacher, Ron raised 4 kids with his wife, Gretchen, whom he adored. One year, in celebration of the arrival of spring after a cold winter, Ron and Gretchen set out to the hardware store to get flowers and plants for the front yard, along with a few other supplies for the house. Pulling into the parking lot, they got out of the car and decided to divide and conquer, with Ron getting the plants and Gretchen setting off to the plumbing department. With enthusiastic zeal, Uncle Ron made a beeline for the gardening section. He jumped deep into his DMN, envisioning how each type of flower and foliage would look in the front yard, making mental notes on where his shovel and planting tools were in the garage, and daydreaming about how beautiful the yard would look after it was all finished. Once home, digging in the dirt, Ron moved squarely into his task mode to a fault, methodically plotting out the perfect distance between the plants, creating exacting, uniform holes, taking care to watch the roots as he pulled the plants from the plastic containers. This continued until his teenage daughter, Renee, came out the front door. "Dad, where's Mom?" she asked. It took a minute to sink in. Uncle Ron suddenly realized that he had left Gretchen at the store. When he left the parking lot, he was so focused in the front part of his DMN, planning for the future, envisioning his garden, that he didn't connect to the back part of his DMN, the history. That revealed he had a wife he adored, and the memory that they had driven to the store together. If you think he panicked, apologizing profusely, thinking about the love of his life stranded and alone, you would be wrong. Uncle Ron was now so deep in his TPN, focusing on the singular task of taking his plantings to the finish line. He continued to carefully smooth the dirt around a peony with one hand while tossing his keys to Renee with the other, instructing her to take the car to get her mother. "But, Dad," said Renee, "I just have my learner's permit." I can't drive alone. Uncle Ron was very involved with and loved his kids. He frequently rode shotgun with Renee as she learned to drive on side roads and in parking lots. At this point in our story, he had actually arranged for her to have a driving test the following week. So he clearly knew she only had a learner's permit. But his brain was so rigidly focused on his task of planting his flowers that it was not easily connecting to those historical facts in his DMN. Leaving Gretchen stranded wasn't an isolated incident. Gretchen was a substitute teacher, and when she got an assignment at a nearby school, Ron often dropped her off before continuing on to his own job. More than once, he walked through the front door at the end of the day, only to be met with sickening silence. And the realization he had forgotten to pick up his wife where he'd left her that morning. It was not until years later, when their son was being tested for ADHD, that Ron discovered his own. Explaining that ADHD tends to run in families, the psychiatrist inquired if Ron wanted to take a test as well. As you might expect, he was off the charts with his diagnosis. While you might have smiled appreciatively at Uncle Ron's story, the consequences of having faulty, glitchy connections in your brain can sometimes be much more devastating and exhausting than just your spouse's inconvenience. It can seriously affect schoolwork, your job, your relationships, and your overall feeling of well-being. Those of us with ADHD or VAST battle constant frustration from being 2 steps behind. Not to mention the ire of those we are behind, because we're trapped in one area of the brain or another. Another extremely common problem when caught in the DMN is what we call pirouette syndrome. A circling back to make sure you've done something you've already done. Some people pirouette to be sure they've locked the front door or didn't leave eggs boiling on the stove. Others circle back to find something they are sure they've forgotten, sunglasses, a wallet. When you aren't paying attention in your TPN, it takes a lot of energy to check and double-check to make sure you didn't pull a royal screw-up. Chances are you did lock the door, took the eggs off the stove, and had your sunglasses on top of your head. But because you weren't focused in the moment, niggling doubt keeps you panicked until you can go back and check. Still another curse of the demon is catastrophic thinking. We refer to this as Chicken Little syndrome. As it's easy to believe the sky is falling. A young attorney confessed she has a tough time starting new cases as she immediately jumps to the future part of her DMN and stays there. Endlessly envisioning and obsessing about what can go wrong with her argument, the 5,000 ways her client might misbehave. The 10,000 ways she might blow it with the jury. As she knows only too well, while it is always good to develop options in case things go wrong. If you stay there too long, you can't focus on the task at hand and work effectively toward preventing those mistakes. Of course, catastrophic thinking is a form of rumination. Your boss throws off a comment that you perceive as a slight. The rear part of the DMN spins into overdrive, looking back at what she said. Taking it apart, wondering what you did to deserve that. Was it really a pointed dig? Then you beat yourself up, thinking back, ruminating on what you might have said or done to provoke the comment. You take apart every imperfect thing you said or did at work, reliving the embarrassment. There's more than enough angst to go around. Then there's the front part of the DMN, where you ruminate on plans and make lists. You go over and over and over what you will say to your boss to straighten things out, or how you will chastise her and quit. Stressing about her reaction, your cowardice, and the fallout. You're convinced you're going to screw it up, as this is the part of the brain that projects humiliating occurrences happening again. The clever art of outsmarting the demon. There's a famous saying among neuroscientists. Neurons that fire together, wire together. To be sure, when you're ruminating, you're repeatedly doing something that fosters a negative connection over time. But this neurological understanding shines a light on the solution as well. If neurons that fire together, wire together, making increasingly permanent connections, you need to fire them in another direction. The trick is to take advantage of the fact that the DMN can jump tracks. Because if it can run to darkness, well, then, we can make it jump tracks and run to the light. Two can play at this game. In other words, spend more time in the TPN focusing on a single task. We know what you might be thinking, the whole point is that I can't focus on a single task. But you can, you are already a master of distraction, so now distract yourself. Productivity isn't the point here. Moving the toggle switch is. As a practical matter, this means that the minute you start to ruminate and slip into brooding negativity, look elsewhere. Do anything. Walk around. Yell. Dance a jig. Dice celery. Play the piano. Feed your dog. Sing, row, row, row your boat. While standing on one leg. Tie your shoes. Whistle, Dixie. Blow your nose. Jump rope. Bark like a dog, howl like a wolf. Call a radio show and vent like a maniac. Do a crossword. Work your brain. Read a book. Hell, why not write a book? Sure, dig a hole or fry a few eggs. Or try an exercise that zeroes in on your breathing. Pick a pattern to focus on, for example, 6-3-8-3. Inhale for 6 beats, hold for 3. Exhale for 8 beats, hold for 3, repeat. After a few cycles, you will move out of the DMN. The point is, focus on anything external to yourself. Activating the TPN will shut down the DMN. It's difficult to do because the DMN is seductive, and the negative messages it is feeding you are captivating and convincing, born out of your past experiences. But you must not allow yourself to be drawn in, you must quickly do something active to engage the TPN. Once you engage the TPN, you can usually turn the demon back into the angel it was before. You can redirect the imagination to feed the TPN with positive, constructive material. Then the DMN becomes the angel it's meant to be. Facilitative imagination. It's only when it is at rest, in repose, not creating, that it spews bile and becomes the demon. When it feeds on itself, the angelic imagination turns demonic. This devil does indeed find work for idle hands. One caveat, even though we've touted the TPN as your ally and friend, it's important to note that it's not blameless. And it, too, can go to the extreme. Indeed, we often refer to people who are the opposite of ADHD as having attention surplus disorder. These are the bureaucrats, the automatons. The emotionless, by the book. Detail-oriented types who are never late and always obey rules but never have new ideas and never laugh. They are habitually stuck in the TPN. Think about Uncle Ron and his analytical focus on his plans, losing sight of any empathy for the beloved wife he left at the store. When you're stuck in the TPN, it's easy to think about people in mechanical rather than relational ways. Whoever came up with the expression, one-track mind, was inadvertently describing the TPN. One study of managers showed that leaders totally focused on tasks are less supportive and nurturing of their teams than other managers. They can be rigid, narrow-minded, and unaccepting of ideas from others. Research suggests a quick fix is oxytocin, also known as the love drug or cuddle hormone, as it is released with a hug or warm social bonding. While a hug might not be appropriate in the workplace, it is something you can certainly try with a loved one. And for those with pets, you have a built-in prescription. Maybe it's time to bring more pets into the workplace. What can Hank do? If Hank could learn that the recurring thoughts and feelings that so torment him were not representations of dismal truth but artifacts of his prolific imagination. Then he could learn to switch his focus away from those surges of fear and imagined doom that so haunt him and hold him back. Perhaps Hank needs medication as well. But someone in his predicament is ripe for coaching on how to shut down the DMN. How not to feed the demon. In finding ways of engaging his imagination in constructive tasks, he will be able to turn the DMN into an angel. By connecting it, his imagination, to a useful task, thus activating the TPN. Meditation, exercise, and human connection can also reduce the power of the glitchy switches. We have found this to be a monumentally useful insight for many of our patients. It's all new to them, hot off the presses of the scientific literature, ready to be used to put down the agonies the DMN can stir up. While complicated in its anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and synaptic flow, the DMN is easy to understand for the layman if spelled out in plain English. So, as we recap, we'll keep it simple. Don't feed the demon. Shut off its oxygen by denying it your attention. Do something else that engages your mind. Stay in action.